Being that the topics in my videos mainly revolve around either anime or history, and being the YouTube big shot that I am, I frequently get asked how I manage to put up with either. Whether it be the blatant autism that is anime, or the tediousness of looking into historical subjects. Well, there's a very simple, all-encompassing answer to both that anyone with a degree in Japanology or history knows well. History is anime. Take for example the different fields of history. You have military history, philosophical history, political history, musical history, literary history, and so on and so forth. With these all laid out, one could easily compare these different fields to genres of anime. For example, shonen is one of the most popular types of anime, marketed for boys, and is filled to the brim with action, high stakes, and just a lot of cool stuff. Similarly, military history is one of the most popular fields of history, at least among boys, and well, revolves around how humanity fights itself, and looking at how we have done so. Quite a lot of action thus seeps into this field, with high stakes as well, given the nature of any military clash, and is overall full of a lot of cool stuff as well. You only need to look as far as the story of one of the most popular military men in all of history to easily start drawing parallels to anime. Napoleon Bonaparte. I can't pronounce Corsican. Seeing as any history we read has to have some sort of narrative to make any kind of sense, lest it be just information and stats about a certain place on certain dates, which would be frankly death-inviting, it's not too far a stretch to compare any narrative or piece of history to a single anime. It is in this light that we can conclude that Napoleon is literally Kirito from Sword Art Online, and vice versa. Both are unstoppable people who are an obvious protagonist for their world. In fact, some would say too obvious, and both had pretty questionable relations with women. But if you really are that kind of guy that fawns over equipment, statistics, and logistics, which we still view through narratives of advancement and competition anyways, but then there is anime more like that too. The obvious one to point to here is Girls on Panzer, which constantly makes historical references and comments on the equipment used by the armies of World War II. And it certainly is cool to see in action, even if it's a bit, well, anime-ish. Another less obvious one to point to is that of Shirobako, an anime about an anime production team, and what goes into the process of making an anime. And if you recall, there is a lot more than just fighting that goes into a war, much like how there's much more than just watching an anime that goes into making it, with the logistics, equipment, and production mentioned earlier. Another great comparison here is that of the idol and music shows and musical history. I don't think I really need to say much here actually, it's rather obvious now. Just know that K-On! Is basically the Beatles. Draw the parallels yourself, I really can't be bothered. Barry Lyndon is an anime I also want to argue has relevance to this subject, but not in the same way as the others thus far have, in so that they fit into a field of history and is a narrative based on something in that field. No, Barry Lyndon is more an anime about the subject of history as a whole, and the individual's role in it. Whereas other anime that might seem similar to it at first glance are about someone's adventure and how it affected the world they inhabit, Barry Lyndon is more about how the individual doesn't really matter when it comes to history. In fact, the story needn't even take place in a historical setting to make its points, but it does so anyways to hammer the point home. And I must say, it really goes far and beyond to depict a period it didn't really need to begin with. I mean, look at these frames. Yes, quite. Throughout the anime, Barry is taken on many wild adventures, bears witness to many events that shaped Europe at the time, and has quite an adventure from being an exiled Irish farmer's boy to his standing in the nobility. But despite all he does and bears witness to, in the end, he's just an ordinary guy that is even quite despicable at times. and unlike Kirito and Napoleon, does not seem fit for his own anime at all. Why make an anime with expensive animation and the like about such a man, when there are others far more worthy? In the end, it's all for that comment on how nobody's lives are all too important in the grand scheme of things, and all the things that happen in history will happen regardless of any one individual's input. So what? Does none of it matter? Does it even matter that I struggle every day with talking to anyone? Struggling to see how I fit into the society that I live in? Struggle with getting the most basic of messages across to other people? Does any of it really matter in the end? My ponderings on how I would be a better person if I were only more outgoing, more easily approachable, all for naught? I guess so. Maybe in the end, none of this really matters. And that's alright. Maybe. Maybe. Also, like the case with the Northwest Passage, anime might be based around people trying to reach a single goal and meeting many challenges along the way. An excellent example of this is One Piece, seeing as they are also seafaring, like in the passage, and meet many unknown dangers and threats on their travels. Pretty wacky. So as you can see, the reason people can spend their lives studying certain seemingly boring or retarded subjects is with the thought that it is something else in mind. Therefore is anime history, and the more people that start to realize this, the better.
Vem kan segla förutan vind? Vem kan ro utan årar? Vem kan skiljas från vännen sin utan